spirituality. So for the last year, Hidden Spirituality was a series that we were creating that was exploring the hidden spiritual symbolism inside of pop culture and games and art and movies and this kind of stuff. And we actually, even at the very end of the year, we branched into Christmas, and we had talks of doing other holidays and other aspects of life where there's hidden spirituality. But one of the big changes that's happening this year now is a lot more live content. And so today we're going to try something. It's a bit of an experiment. You have to let us know how you enjoy this, how this works out. We're going to try doing a Hidden Spirituality live streamed. And so to start us off today, we thought it would be really fun because we did just start a Twitch channel, and we thought it would be fun to do a Hidden Spirituality of gaming, since in the past we've talked about the mysticism in like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy VII and this and that kind of thing. And so joining me today on this call is Nelson, Chris, and Zach. And these are all fabulous people, fantastic members of Spirit Science and Spirit Mysteries. And should we do just like a short round of introduction, guys?
Sure. Yeah. Why not?
Cool. Nelson, take it away.
Hi, I'm Nelson Blake II. I'm an artist working here at Spirit Science. Also work for Marvel, DC, and many other comic book companies and that kind of thing. And a huge gamer. Big fan of gaming, all kinds, and so on and so forth. So happy to have this discussion with you guys.
Cool. I'm Chris. I'm one of the lead writers and researchers, so it's a pretty fun job. And I'm pretty heavily into strat games, for strategy games. It's pretty fun. But yeah, that's about it for now. See where things go.
Okay, I guess that's me. Hey guys, I'm Zach. I am an editor here for Spirit Science. You guys may not know, but I've been doing the last few rounds of Hidden Spirituality, so the last couple of videos. I started at Uncle Iroh's Wisdom. That was my first one, and I've gone since then. I like gaming. I'm into like first-person shooters, like the Call of Duty, the Overwatch. Did a little bit of Rocket League in there. Big fan of Star Wars, and that pretty much sums me up.
Awesome. Yeah, and you guys all know me. My name's Jordan, and I like Smash Ultimate, and have grown up with a lot of different video games as well. And so, just like to start us off today, we each kind of came up with a subject that we wanted to talk about on the stream. Nelson, you were the first one who kind of added about the simulation theory. Do you want to kind of just jump into that right off the bat?
Absolutely. So one of the great things in spirituality is this idea of simulation theory, that the entire universe is made up of basically ones and zeros, this binary code, which we've actually discovered somewhat, right? We've had real physicists come out and talk about this kind of thing. And until we had games, we had no real life metaphor to describe how that could happen. But games are literally a world of code that is all ones and zeros, but when you play the game, if you're Lara Croft climbing a mountain, that mountain is solid for you in that experience. That's a direct metaphor for what the code could mean for us being here as people, but it's also a metaphor for what happens when you project your consciousness into a simulation, if this was a simulation as well.
It's really, I mean, like, the whole idea, like, life is just like literally just like a video game, is not something that's new. I think that just even the basis of what you're just describing, though, is like, it does, you're right, it makes it relatable. What do you guys think? Chris, Zach?
It's interesting though, because I have this theory, right? And this sort of ties in with more like stuff like ghosts and stuff, right? I have this idea that a ghost, or what people perceive us as a ghost, is actually some kind of hologram, right? And so far, because throughout all of history, we haven't, it's only really like in recent decades that we've come up with simulation theory or understood simulation theory, that we've finally been able to understand exactly what a hologram is, right? And how it works and how it's sort of a section of code or something like that, right? But I have this theory, like what people perceive as ghosts are actually some kind of hologram that's existing in some form in, I guess, the coding of reality. Or you can think of them as glitches in reality or something like that, right? But yeah, no, Nelson's picked up on like what you said. You know, when you see something in a game or when you feel something in a game, it feels real to you. And again, like Lara Croft is a great example when you're climbing a mountain or something, because you have, I think Lara Croft does this a lot. You have sort of like quick time events, right, where you have to react instantly to something in a game if you press a certain button, or like a vibrating controller works really well with it as well, because it kind of gets you in that thing. So like when you hit a wall or something, it vibrates, right? And you sort of, as you're holding it, it like vibrates your entire body, right? And it feels just as real as if you would hit an actual wall sometimes. And it's one of those funny things. I don't know if everyone else does it, but like if I'm in a game and I'm getting like my ass beat, right, I will like lean forward and like get really far into it. And it's like, it's not gonna help me at all. Like all my input is coming either from a keyboard or a controller. But somehow leaning forward and leaning into it and focusing more on something somehow makes me a better player, because I'm kind of immersing myself more in that reality. And it's, I don't know, it's a really weird feeling. You can't really describe it unless you do it. Yeah. And it's like, you can kind of feel the weight of every movement you do. Like something like For Honor. Have you got played For Honor? Yeah. So the whole like fighting system in that game is amazing. I'm completely hooked on it. But it's, you know, you have to match your guard to the opponent. And the whole point of it is you feel the weight of every swing of your sword, right? And on the surface, you know, you're thinking, oh, well, it wouldn't work, right? You're sitting on your couch with a controller and that's it. But when you actually get into it and when you're in like one-on-one battles and it's really working, you really do feel it. And it's a really weird feeling to have, because you kind of find yourself moving with each like sword swing. And it makes sense completely how video games are the most immersive form of entertainment, because they really do, they suck you in. And then it's, you know, you get an entire new dimension of discussion between like VR and stuff into the picture. Because there's like no distinction then between what's real and what's not, right? And especially like some of those like more, I've seen them at like expos and stuff like that. People have like VR headsets and like treadmills and stuff like that, so you can actually run in VR and like you're actually fully moving and you're engaging your entire body. And I feel like that's like the future of gaming, which is going to be really cool to see and see how like it actually works. But
so Chris, you touched on a great point though, because you talk about how the coders of the game are doing everything they can to convince you that this is real, so that you really play the game, right? Like we've seen, you know, it's a dirty term for a lot of people, casual gamer, right? And this idea that you play casually, you're not really in it. You don't go through the struggles that a hardcore gamer goes through. And hardcore gamers are people that completely invest themselves into the game. And that's how they get good at the game. And it's funny because if you look at that according to real life, right? What happens with a lot of people with spirituality is when they learn the idea of possibly simulate that this is a simulation, or that there's another life outside of this life, they want to check out and they want to stop playing the game. When the whole point of being in the game is to master the game. You're not supposed to just put your controller down and walk away and escape just because it's not real, because your consciousness is real. And the fact that you decided to play the game is real. So when you invest yourself into it fully, you get the most out of it. And in that sense, even though it's a simulation, it's as real as your consciousness decides to allow you to invest yourself, which allows you to get the most out of it, which is like the designers of the game don't make you fall off of the cliff because they actually want to hurt you, right? But that danger needs to be there in order for you to master jumping and rappelling and stuff. Right. And so you look at real life, there's kind of that same thing, and games can teach you how to apply that same idea. Like life isn't just hard so that you suffer, but the presence of suffering in this coding and the simulation that we have invests you into the gift of the simulation of life so you get the most out of it before you get out of here. Play something else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it feeds into this thing. When I was little, the biggest takeaway I always got from any video game that I played, and it sounds kind of cheesy, but it actually kind of works, but if there are no enemies on the map, you're probably going the wrong way, right? You need to
Right.
turn around and actually go towards the enemies. Because
Yeah.
the enemy is the only way that when you know you're progressing. If you're going back and you're like going the wrong way on the map, you're not going to find anything like boss moves and stuff, right? But you know, principles like that, the stuff you learn in gaming, can be extrapolated into real life. And a lot of the time, some of the skills and I think the patience as well you learn in gaming. You have to be pretty patient to dying in a certain section or something, right? You can extrapolate it to everything else. So it's not just like you sit down, like you say, you have to integrate your entire consciousness into it. You know, you can pull everything out of it, but the second that you do integrate that consciousness, then you know your entire life can change. You can learn stuff from it. It's a medium of transmission, I think, definitely.
Well, this is, I mean, like Chris, you even this kind of branches into the subject that you brought up earlier, and like your point in advance, right? Which is just like the ability to immerse yourself in higher worlds, like the ability, you know, even kind of relating these ideas together is we have, you know, the like if we look at like sort of the more esoteric, mystical aspects of the spirit science stuff that we talk about, like the tree of life and, you know, this sort of descent of spirit, like this formless, infinite source field descent into like creating a reality and then embedding itself into it. We have this almost like that hermetic law of as above, so below, of we are down here with our physical bodies and our illusion of separateness and the ability to create these artificial worlds that we can then embed ourselves into. So it's like just kind of following that chain, doing exactly what, you know, is said to have been happening on a mystical level from the universe down to us. We're, you know, now within our mindscapes, this like with all of our infinite potential, creating a reality and then embedding ourselves into it in order to learn or to have an experience of some kind, which is very fascinating. I was wondering, I mean, if even if Chris or anybody has anything to add to take that further.
Yeah, wait. Zach, is that your hand up or you're just scratching your head?
You're good, man. You're good. Go ahead.
But no, yeah, no. So like I said, this like I was saying earlier, it's, you know, we had this idea like ages ago to do a hidden spirituality of animation as well. And it kind of links open in sort of a similar vein. You can sort of compare it to, you know, animations, like you said, you know, so something starting with higher, you know, descending downwards and getting denser, I guess you could say, as it comes through. But I think something like gaming as well, it's an amazing creative outlet as well. And it's not just necessarily in the act of playing, it's also necessarily how you play, right? Especially, and this is a lot more, this is one of the reasons I absolutely love strategy games and, you know, other things like that. There's no one single way to play a game, right? And sometimes one of the best parts about a game or a community even as well is everyone finds a different way to accomplish the same thing or complete the same level. Everyone finds a different path and does different things, right? And especially with strategy games, everyone has, you know, different attack strategies or whatever that, you know, break things down and work. But it acts as just massive outlet for creativity, and you know you can raise any number of questions about like how you're interacting with that and sort of where that creative mindset is coming from, whether it's coming from inside yourself or it's coming from somewhere else. You know, yeah, no, I think it's especially when the creators are doing, you know, storyboarding and designing and their art styles and everything. It's kind of like being a god, right? You're effectively creating an entire universe, and then somebody is interacting with that universe, and people are living in the universe and they're doing it. But the ultimate act itself is an act of creation, right? Because you are creating this whole expansive world, and then you can interact with it in your own way, and people can interact with it in loads of different ways and have their experience. Even though there is this sort of one overarching code, no two players' experiences are always the same, arguably. Everyone interacts with it in their own way, and everyone takes away their own things from it. And effectively, that's the same life, right? If you think of it as simulation theory, if there's like a single overarching code for something to reality, that's sort of the general frame of the developer, right? And then everyone sort of interacts with it in their own way and takes their own experiences from it. And there are so many parallels that we talk about. But I mean, oh, Zach, you haven't spoken. I feel like you've been speaking for ages. What do you want to
Yo.
say?
Well, just to touch on that, I mean, you know what? Whenever you said that about God, you're like creator of these games. That's like a subject that I haven't ever put two and two together. I've been gaming like my whole life, right? And obviously, I've always looked as like the developing team as those guys. But you know, that really resonated with me when you said that because you're 100% right. Um, what it is like these guys have like a you know their creative vision and energy and their talents that they've learned. It's really crazy because you know they can feed straight into that, right? So and that goes kind of with what Nelson was saying about the simulation theory too. Something I was thinking about whenever we were talking about that was the pure basis that as games grow up and as like they've evolved, it's about like what's more realistic, right? Every game wants to be more realistic, which is it kind of completely negates the whole concept of leaving reality to go into these mystical journeys and stuff like that, which is something that I find pretty interesting. But that all comes back down to it being realistic because you want to be immersed into this, right? So if you're doing something and you like you said, Laura Croft on a rock, and you fall and you survive, it's a little like, I don't know if I could do that, right? So on one hand, that's kind of the point, right? Whenever you're watching, let's say Star Wars, and there's like the Jedi's doing all the jumps and they're falling really high, it immediately is like, oh, you know, he can do this because of who he is. So it's kind of cool. It's a kind of cool way. It's like both sides of the coin there. I
Mm-hmm.
think.
You know,
Cool.
I think this is another perfect point to weave in one of the other subjects that we had here, because what I added was like that there's this ability that I find that games offer of personal skill and self-mastery in different areas, right? Like it could be at this specific game, but there seems to be also just like, you know, practicing your what did they call the motor controls of your body, like, you know, your ability, your muscle memory to really to synchronize your thoughts and your feelings and your actions in real time, especially like some games have more like you know, like the Civilization and the RTS games, you have a little bit of a higher level, broader overview. But like fighting games have more of a, like, you really have to be like, you know, very precise about every little thought and action that you do, and that can actually train your mind and your yeah, just like your muscle memory, your motor controls, your whole body of consciousness to be like more alert, more present, to be more responsive. And also I mean, it's so I've talked about this on the stream before, but I find it really, I've gone through waves of enjoying watching like people rage quitting games when they get salty, because it's really funny. But also, I've been there. Like, I know what it feels like to get really salty at a game, and get really frustrated. And even like going back when I was like 13 years old, I got the first Devil May Cry game, and like the first boss, this like giant spider, was so scary to me as like a 13-year-old. Like my hands were just like sweating every time I fought him. It was crazy. But like there is that like that ability to practice discipline that comes from it, purposefully putting yourself in the state of like, you are safe, you're taken care of, you're fed, or you're, you know, you've got air, like you're not running a marathon, you're not being chased by a lion, but you're simulating this experience of you know, like a struggle or some kind of, you know, thing, some obstacle that you have to overcome, and you're kind of putting yourself under stress to say like, can I face this with, you know, with confidence and courage and bravery and you know, all of these attributes, and help like almost like simulate and create within yourself those feelings that you might not otherwise have in the everyday world, because most people aren't jumping into like a tiger's den just to see if they can get out okay, you know, or beat up the animal. So that's like there's like a personal skill and mastery, and even taking, I guess my last thought on this too, because I want to hear what you guys' thoughts are on this, but relating this back to learning other aspects of life, one of the most valuable things that I think games can offer is the ability to gamify other aspects of life that are a little bit more boring and mundane. Because like a lot of like the school system, like we all talk about how outdated the school system is, but video games have figured out, they've cracked the code on how to teach a person a concept and get them really good at it over the course of different like you know, it's like a combination of like slowly increasing the you know, the difficulty while also providing these like amazing feelings of rewards, even if it's just like a congratulations and there's confetti and you get like a level up or you get a trophy, these things that like compel you to do better. And those, all of that wisdom needs to be applied to education in a big way, and it will transform the education industry. And the example that I like to give is actually that I'm learning piano right now. I'm doing, for those watching who want to tune into that, I'm doing a live stream on my personal YouTube and Facebook pages fairly regularly where I'm just learning piano using this app. But the app is like a video game of learning piano. So I'm sitting at the piano and playing, but it's 1,000 times more fun than when I was sitting with like some, you know, old lady next to me when I was 10 being like, now press the A key. Like, it's a completely different vibe. And so the principles of gamification can be applied across the board. And that's something really valuable. And there's a tremendous body of spirituality in that I just had to speak to.
Now, I absolutely love that, Jordan. And it's funny because Chris, I don't mean to exclude you here, but Jordan, Zach, and myself, we've all talked about how if you're playing a fighting game, and we include Smash in the fighting game arena, if you don't get your butt in training mode, you're not going to beat that guy, right? Whoever it is that's beating you all the time, if you don't get in the training mode, it's not going to happen for you. And that is something you can directly extract out to real life, because that experience of, well, I'm just going to play over and over and eventually I'll get it. You realize at some point you have to involve the actual skills of muscle memory, learning the information, self-criticism in order to accomplish your goals. And games do that in a way that, like you said, Jordan, it flawlessly, I want to say flawlessly, because if you look at someone grab a controller for the first time, you remember how bad people actually are at video games. If you watch a bunch of gamers, what we consider a bad gamer in the gaming realm is a fantastic gamer, right? If you give a controller to like your grandmother or, you know, your uncle who's never played or something like that, and you watch them, you know, the gun is up and down and they're mashing one button over and over again, like, you know, like you might as well have given the controller to your pet. And then you watch just the average person in Smash or Marvel vs. Capcom, you know, wall climbing, and this all comes from the fact that they have disciplined themselves, like Jordan said, to go to this next phase. And applying those same principles in the gaming realm to real life is honestly a great gift of gaming that I see a lot of streamers and YouTubers pick up on as they go from excellent gamers, but nothing else in their life is like particularly great when they first start their channels. But then they become better at talking to people, better at production value, better at the business side of things, better at merchandising. But I hear a lot of them say, in fact, I hear entrepreneurs say, I actually was addicted to World of Warcraft before I started my business, but I just took that same mentality and I moved it over here.
And that's interesting. And you know what? I think it's important from there to talk about like the skill gaps and how you can get better, right? And Jordan brought up a good point with Betty and all of that stuff. So like I touched on earlier, is I play like games like Overwatch and Rocket League, and those are very competitive games, and they even have like a really huge esports following. And I don't think we can have a conversation about gaming and not bring up the current level of like esports, right? So the way that gaming in general has evolved is very interesting, because whenever I was a kid, I remember people telling me, it's like, okay, you're wasting your time with this, right? And so the way that it's moved up and it's moved into this new arena, literally, of competitive gaming, and it's just amazing, right? So to be able to work hard on your skill level, and you can actually track your progress by playing with people in your rank and in your division, and to your skill allows you to grow and to be better, and you can physically see it, and you can see the shiny diamond whenever you hit diamond. You can see the wings on like a grand champ like icon, you know, or whatever it is. It's just amazing how like gaming has evolved to become such a big thing. Like right now there's streams on like ESPN for like Fortnite and stuff like that, which a lot of people that aren't in that industry are like, what the heck is this? This is crazy, you know? But for other people, it's just, you know, kind of like a goal or a shot
You know,
to
this
get
is
to that.
this is a really, really good branch then, really to the last point that we had, which was Zach's point, actually. So Zach, thanks for bringing us there too, because the reason why we're talking about this at all, for for everyone watching, and like the reason why we made a Twitch channel, is that there's just a level of toxicity in a lot of online gaming communities right now that doesn't necessarily need to be there, but it's there for a reason. It's a reflection of where we're at often as a species, and it is really a reflection of the way that we relate with each other. I can say, even for myself, like when Smash Ultimate came out, I went to a few tournaments locally in Winnipeg, and I found like basically nobody wanted anything to do with anyone else unless they were really good. And if they were good at the game, then suddenly like you'd be the most popular guy in the room. But otherwise, if you're just some normal person, like there's like just a lack of care, a lack of interest. There's because you're not a pro gamer, so then why would I want to have anything to do with you? Is the mindset. And just like everything from trash talk to just generally like the way that people, like the language that people use in online gaming, is an issue, and something that we felt like if we created a space for like higher conscious gaming, that we could at least participate in the conversation with a higher frequency. And yeah, do you any of you guys want to like jump in and add to that?
Absolutely, if you guys don't mind, if I
Take it.
jump in on this one. So one of the cool things about gaming for toxicity and all of that is it's kind of, at this point, it's a bit of expected, right? And I say it's a cool thing, but I don't really mean it's cool. It's like interesting, more or less, right? You jump into an online match of anything, for the most part, you're going to expect trash talk, and you're going to expect all these things, right? Now, the casual person that doesn't really game like that would probably see all of this and hear all of this and maybe take it in different, as someone like me who's been gaming forever and grew up in that environment. Now, I know, part of that is interesting to think about as well, because the online aspect, right? So if it was face to face, or even like this with like a stream and like group chats, and like I can look at Nelson, it's gonna be a little harder if I don't know him to like look him in the eye and be toxic and just be rude for no apparent reason, as opposed to just a name, not even his name, but just like a gamer tag on a screen, right? So all of those kind of touch into that to influence, I guess, the toxic behavior between gaming. I don't know if I could say there'd be a cure to that. I just think part of it is people are growing up with a little bit more thicker skin, at least the people that play up gaming, because they're just kind of, I don't want to say numb, but in a sense they're numb to these insults and to these things. They can just kind of push them off. At least in a general scale, I know there's like cyberbullying and all that's like a huge issue that we could touch on if you guys wanted to, but I feel like those would be, at least I hope that they're the further drastic, radical situations.
Yeah, I think you guys both make excellent points, and I'll first relate a personal thing. So I grew up playing a lot of the Street Fighter in the arcades and stuff back when there were still arcades, and then later on took it online. So we had the benefit of being face to face. And if you grew up in a rough neighborhood, there was only so much of a pop off you were going to do in the arcade. For the bigger kids got a hold of you and said enough of that, right? But so when it came to online toxicity, I didn't have it inherently because I had that training from Street Fighter until I played Overwatch, and I had to rely on teammates to help me win. Then I found my personal toxicity. And the funny thing about it, Zach, is I feel like gamers have already solved it in the same way that many sports psychologists who are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars have solved it. If you look at some of the most positive streamers, there's two principles that they follow that anybody can apply to any hardship or toxicity in their actual life. Number one, what can I learn from this? Right? You play Overwatch trying
Absolutely.
to win every single match, you are going to drive yourself crazy. But if you're losing and something's going wrong for you and you go, what's the lesson here? Then you get out of the survival instinct mentality, right? That red chakra mentality, and you move into, okay, my thinking brain is here now. My consciousness has been invited back into the conversation. And then another thing that I learned this, I think it's Emong from Overwatch that I got this from the most, or him or Jane, where they just go, unlucky. Even if it's totally that the Genji player on their team is throwing, that guy's having a bad day, and the last match somebody threw for him, so he's going to continue that chain of negativity into their match. They're completely undeserving. They've made every right decision. They're great players, yet this match is still going to be a loss because this one person is that determined to make it a loss. Unlucky. And this is a lesson about humility in life, that once you just allow unlucky to be a part of your vocabulary, a part of your spirit, you're not under all of the hardships of life. Everybody encounters hardship, but you don't have to be underneath the weight of it all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And this is a lesson that I think in particular esports, because you cannot be but so successful in esports before in some way you have to become better at other things besides playing the game. Right?
That's true. Especially if you get there through like streaming and stuff like that, because you know, a lot of that comes from people that have fan bases and they grow and they do this and make this their full-time job. But like Jordan was saying earlier, you can't do that without learning these other skills and getting better at all of those. So that's a really interesting point there, Nelson.
Mm-hmm. You know, one other aspect even too of just like the way that games are treated. You know, it's like, because I really like, Nelson, that you even said, you know, it's like, what can I learn from this? That's my approach. Whenever that was my big revelation of how to not be salty playing Smash, specifically Smash, because it's a competitive fighting game. So, but also so fun and goofy as it goes. But like, the key was, instead of like trying to win, which is like it's like trying to prove to yourself that you're good enough to win a battle, instead of just being like, using it as a learning tool, changes the mentality a little bit completely into like, wow, they did amazing. How can I perceive the patterns, the it's like open my third eye and perceive the geometric patterns of their formula, and being able to like counter attack or counter them in a way that is appropriate for the setting in the moment of the dance. It's like it's a whole dance. It's really remarkable. And to add to that, kind of on the flip side, is like the way that a lot of people treat games. And I'm bringing this up partially because I saw some comments about it from people, but it's like there's this escapism mentality of a lot of people playing games, because they're miserable in their life, or they're not having, they don't love every aspect of their life. But hey, in this world of Warcraft, I can be a night elf rogue and run around and fly a dragon and stuff. So why wouldn't I just spend more of my time there? And I think that that's another aspect of like what leads to this toxicity, is like there's just like kind of overwhelming negativity, and then you're like segmenting out your consciousness to like, well, the part of my life that I enjoy is in this game, and then the rest of my life is not so good, so I try to spend more time there. And we have to learn and create an education, like within ourselves through our own spirituality and our own practices to find a way to harmonize those and balance those, so that we can learn fun things in that world, and we can bring the wisdom to our real world just as much as we can, like, gain wisdom here in real life and bring that into the gaming world and really kind of integrate them. Because as we talked about in the conspiracy theory of everything, there's a challenge that humanity is kind of coming into facing over the next 10, 15, really 100 years, but like, even the immediate future, is this integration with technology that it seems to be almost an inevitability based on where people are, like what technologies are being created, and doing so in a way where it actually makes, like, it can help people learn and grow and evolve their consciousness and step into higher levels of awareness. Like, if you had a game that helped you solve and cure your depression, like a game version of ayahuasca, like that would be amazing. But it's going to take a great deal of intentional creation to do that. And if the only kind of intentional games that are made, unfortunately this isn't the case, but if it's all war games and that's it, then that's what we're feeding our consciousness into, you know?
Jordan, that's a fantastic point, and I want to highlight something you touched on. When people get depressed with feeling, whether it's anxiety, depression, anger, whatever it is, real life is providing all of this negative feedback, and the games are providing a relief from that. Now, for some people and some situations, some points on their personal timeline, the game is eventually a continuation, right? They're angry in real life, they go to the game and they're toxic. But what we're realizing is you have an opportunity. Games are a really great gift. It's almost like that metaphor for coming, right? Where it's you go into the game to learn the lessons in a safer space for your soul. You're not actually going to die when you fail the raid in World of Warcraft, right? You don't actually die when you lose that match in Overwatch or when you get 3 stocked in Smash or something. You get to play again. It's fun. And you get to over and over and over and over get a chance to convert that lower vibration to a higher vibration, right? At any point in anybody's gaming life, they can embrace unlucky, what do I have to learn? You know, I'm going to be nicer today when I'm socializing. I need guild mates so I can raids regularly. Maybe I should be less of a jerk. You can do that at any point when you're gaming without actually the stakes being the same as in real life of, well, you're not going to get a job to eat and put a roof over your head if you don't stop being a jerk. But sometimes people are too low vibrational to make that call. There's just too much negative feedback in their life for them to see the opportunity. But in the game, over and over, every time you sign in, every time you turn on your console or your PC, you get a chance to be a better gamer and then start to raise that vibration so that it then starts to convert back to real life. And you go, you know what? I went to the store and I had a bad experience, but instead of raging at that person, I already had the practice to be kind because I learned to be kind from these people I met online that embraced me when I was in a bad place. So now I understand what it's like when other people are in a bad place, and I've gained some of the tools to embrace them.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, it's funny though, because the vast majority of sort of gaming culture, right, especially when in more online scenarios, is people just rage with it, right? The second they start getting triggered by something, or the second that they start getting agitated, instead of actually taking the time to sit there and study why they're reacting and what sort of feelings that's bringing up and why they're reacting that way, they just immediately rage quit. It's kind of like hitting that barrier, right? Like that people aren't necessarily integrated enough, but they're not prepared necessarily to go that extra mile to sort of do that work. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying, where, you know, in order to properly integrate it, you need to kind of study what the person's doing, you know, study the geometry of their movements, stuff like that. And in fighting games, it makes equal sense, especially with stuff like Overwatch, For Honor, I assume Smash as well, because people have different movesets or whatever. People will play, like, depending on their style, right? So Nelson, as you said, will bring their outside world emotions to the game. So sometimes, and I found this as well in my own personal gaming, is if I have a certain emotion, my moveset will sometimes change to reflect that, right? So I will have an entirely different moveset if I come into it angry, whereas if I come in relaxed, for example, like if I'm angry, I'll play more aggressively, or I'll play with a more aggressive stance or something like that, and I'll take more risks. Whereas if I come in relaxed and calm, I'll be more sort of defensive. But it's interesting because the second people sort of rage quit, and the second they kind of just push it to the side and go somewhere else, they're kind of cutting themselves off from that chance to sort of assimilate that experience. Because the only way to sort of get better against something, so say, I don't know, you're in a game of like Overwatch or something like that, and it's just like this one particular character, let's say it's the Genji, keeps killing you, right? And he has a set moveset, and you just cannot, for the life of you, figure out how to counter that moveset. If that happens, generally people will just rage quit, because it's like, oh, he's just a bad player, he's spamming light attacks or whatever, or he's spamming his one ability or something like that, right? But the only way to really learn how to counter somebody is to continually die against them, and then continue to just like assimilate their whole moveset until you eventually know how to work against it. And like, again, I refer back to Solana because I played it a lot. It's a great example, because people will either spam certain attacks, stuff like that, and then because for honor you get like a matchmaking penalty if you leave the game, right? So you can't go into another game for like 20 minutes if you rage quit a game. It's quite funny. They kind of try to counteract it. But generally what people do is they will finish one single game, and then if they're dying by one particular person, they'll just rage quit in the game, right? In reality, the only way to actually fix that experience and actually get better at the game is to keep playing with that person, right? Because they will keep triggering different things in you, and you will keep being exposed to those kind of things, and eventually you will recognize their behaviors, and you'll be able to recognize their techniques and be able to work against them. But no one does that, right? The vast majority of people just rage quit the second that they're confronted with some other aspect of life that they're not used to. And I mean, if we were to try and extrapolate it, I guess it was for every single skill, right? There is always that stage in any skill where you're learning something and then you sort of feel like you get a dead end, or like a brick wall and not going any further, and then that's when most people give up. And then they just go off and do something else and they drop it. Like learning music is a good example. So for me, when I play guitar, I remember, especially in the early days when I started learning, I had, because I kind of go through different periods of times where I'll for some reason like learn really fast and be able to assimilate stuff really quickly. Then other times I'll wake up the next morning and I just won't be able to won't be able to play. My fingers won't feel right, and I'll try and learn something and I just won't do it. And I'll throw my hands up and just walk away or whatever and take a break. Well, I remember there was a time when I first started, I think it was me 2 years into my playing, something like that, where I went and had a gig in London and it just went terribly. And it was so bad, and it was like we almost got laughed off stage, and it was horrible. I came home like immediately that night, and I was like, right, that's it. I'm giving up. That's it. I'm never playing guitar again. And I sort of put my guitar in my closet and just never picked it up. And it stayed there for probably, I don't know, a month or two, something like that. And I just didn't play guitar at all for that entire month because I was like, oh, that's it. I'm rage quitting. I'm rage quitting from practice. That's it. But then the second I actually picked it up again and started learning again, my whole learning process just accelerated hugely. And I just learned so much more stuff, so much more quickly, and was able to integrate it so much better because I had sort of gone through that experience of rage quitting to a certain extent. I kind of sat there and was like, well, if I don't go through this experience, I'm never going to be able to actually go past it. We have to sort of confront all of these barriers that we have and really sort of push through them before you can actually get better in yourself.
Chris, could I actually tell a brief story about this as well that's very relevant to what you're describing? I hope I'm not interrupting too much here.
Yeah.
Also, we're at about the 50-minute mark, so we'll try maybe like in the next 10 minutes. If we're saying an hour max, we'll aim for that. Yeah. But so this is a true story. This happened like maybe a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago. I've taken a very long leave of absence from cannabis, but we've talked about that's a conversation for another time. But we did have a Spirit Science Cannabis episode movie if you haven't seen it for people watching. But I had taken probably like 3 or 4 months off of cannabis and hadn't touched it. And then again, like a week and a half ago or so, there was this sort of spark of feeling to try it, to have some. And so it just so happened that after doing that, like the creative juices to go and learn and play Smash was also kind of rearing up. So I was like, perfect, those go together very well. And the medicine put me into a state of like actually perceiving the geometry of the game and the experience at a whole different, just a whole another way. Like I really felt like I was learning and integrating a lot faster and a lot more than I had previously. And so the link here to the rage quitting, this is really actually remarkable to see how consciousness and feelings and thoughts directly will interface and relate with technology. Because I was playing this game against this one guy, and he was beating me. He got me down to 1 stock. I think I had him at 2, but because of the cannabis and like that, what I think Chris, you were actually talking about it of like leaning into the game. Like I had this moment of being like, no, I can do this. I can beat him. I have to integrate myself more fully. And so I did and put myself in this state. And suddenly I just started seeing him and his patterns so much more clearer. and was able to read his moves easily. It was like the Matrix of just suddenly I was Neo after being reborn. I was just like, this is easy. Suddenly this is easy. And I could feel through his motions, like through his movements, just intuitively, I could tell that he was getting nervous. As I slowly did up his damage, got another stock, started building up his damage, and then towards like in the last like 15 seconds before he died, the game started like actually lagging. Like I would notice this what I interpreted as his energy, his frustration at the game, like coming through in how he was moving and the lag of the game. It all just synced together. And I got the confirmation, which was the moment that I think I spiked him, and he like exploded. The entire game froze, and I could tell him like he's turned off his switch or like smashed the controller or something that caused the entire thing to he disconnected. And it was such a visceral experience to be like, wow, like the direct correlation of like this is more than just playing a game. If we think about it as far as playing a game, this is your synthesis of your left brain and right brain interfacing through an electrophysical digital medium in direct competition with someone else's consciousness who's interfacing in the same way. Like this is a battle of consciousness, or like an experience of two consciousness maybe is the word, interfacing together, as opposed to like, oh, we're just playing a game. Like that's such a superficial way of actually looking at what's happening. And the one final thing I wanted to bring up before we close actually was that one person in the comments at one point said, well, what about something like a simple game of cards? And it's funny because we've been talking about like gaming largely as like, playing on a console or PC gaming or esports, but playing a card game or a board game or, like I love Scrabble myself. It's really fun. And like any kind of game like that also could serve the exact same purpose of teaching you a concept. I reckon, it's probably, if you go back, you probably find out that Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates probably played a lot of Monopoly or,
right.
And if we're looking at gaming across the board, I think we could probably summarize, and this is just my initial thought, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts too, but like the summation of this conversation could really be that games, if we choose them to be, can be this medium for learning, for bringing people together, for community, and all kinds of really creative expression, if we desire to explore it in that way. But as long as we hold on to it, as an escape, as a means of escape or something like that, or just like a way of proving to yourself that you're worth something, just like bolstering your ego or your pride or something, then gaming would stay limited. And it's up to all of the gamers and all of the game creators to be able to help push this medium into a higher and higher reality as we continue to evolve as a species.
Yeah, Jordan, you touched on some great points there. Two things that you said that really stood out to me. Number one, to go back to your Smash example, one of a great lesson in there was you had a self-definition of what you could and couldn't do. And you put that harmful imagination aside for a second and just literally leaned in and used your observational skills, right? And by observing, your imagination for a second was wrong. And it shows us how our self-definitions aren't always useful. Sometimes we need to put them aside and actually just observe the world around us and take in that information and allow that gift to take us to the next level of what we're trying to do. And another thing that you were talking about is basically games can be this or games can be that. And I think a lot of people talking about it's just gaming, it's just a distraction. Games can be what you allow or give them permission to be. But what's true is this is where you're putting your consciousness for this amount of time. This is what you're doing with your consciousness. And some part of you understand that. So if gaming is harming you, maybe some part of you doesn't like how you're using your consciousness in that realm. And if gaming is helping you, it might be that opposite thing we talked about, where you're using it as a transformational thing to take that lower vibration and convert that energy to something that's more in alignment with what you really want.
So I had to take a few screenshots while you said that, specifically because someone in the comments was saying that they've been working on a game that teaches astrology and tarot through a 3D environment and wants to connect with spirit science to help work on it. And I'm like, oh, we're connecting. Because we've been talking about this for a long time, of like the evolution of spirit science being the studio that is not so limited that it only makes YouTube videos, that we have our mystery school, that we make games, that we maybe make a show for Netflix. Maybe we can do something that goes to theaters one day, right? There's a lot of things that we have in the works. So just, props to that person. Sorry, Nelson, if I was distracting there.
No.
So
I was done. It's Chris's turn. Chris or Zach?
Yeah, this is sort of in summation, final thoughts. What do you guys got?
I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was pretty cool, like how we touched on everything. There was a lot to take in there. For a minute there, I just sat there and just took it in. You guys have a lot of value. The way you see gaming is really interesting to just be able to experience. What I take from this conversation the most would be the similarities, indeed, between gaming and real life, right? So the objective in gaming is to win, I would say, right? So you want to also take in the same stuff, the dedication and all the time that you spend learning, getting better as a gamer. If you take those same things and you apply them to life, then you can win life, essentially, right? To be more successful and to be just happier in your own skin and in your own household. So those kind of things, I like. Those really resonate with me, those similarities between this simulation, because in a sense that they kind of are a simulation of a fictional life. It's a world that's created between these developers. We've made the comparison that they're like the gods, right? And we're the people living this life. It's kind of the same thing to like our real consciousness. And I find that very interesting.
Yeah, no, so touching on that, I guess the thing I'm coming away with this is just sort of asking myself, if life is sort of a coded game, effectively, if you think of it like that, are you an NPC or are you a main character, right? And to what extent do the roles overlap?
Ooh.
How much of your life or your consciousness, whatever you want to call it, how you experience it, how much of it is scripted, and how much of it is you actually making the choices for yourself and interacting with your own game.
Interesting. Well, actually, okay, that brings up two. That's amazing, because it's kind of like a trigger for people too to like check themselves. Are they a character, an NPC? At the same time, unless depending on the game, it almost still seems like it's like even if you're the main character. For many story-driven games, there are specific like maps and plot points and things that you have to get to complete it. So even though you have the free choice, you're still going through it kind of like as a guided experience. But other games like Minecraft are like, here's a box, have fun, But that's a really good example though, Chris. I love that.
Sounds like a good launch point for the hidden spirituality of gaming too.
We'll see you next week.
Main character and NPC.
Yeah. Are we Steve or are we a villager in Minecraft? We should totally make a spirit science Minecraft server. We should totally do that.
That would probably be a wise idea.
That's probably a good idea. Yeah.
It'd be really fun.
So on that note, with the spirit of bringing this call and this first ever inaugural live edition of the Hidden Spirituality series, bringing it to a close, I would say we're very interested in for us as a team, like on Team Spirit, we have a couple members, many of them here, who play games, and so we decided to make, if we're doing live streaming, that it might be fun to do a Twitch channel, and we have a YouTube channel called Spirit Science Gaming, where we're going to be posting kind of like gaming content with the intention of just creating an atmosphere, creating a space or an environment for gaming in a higher consciousness kind of way. And we don't even entirely know exactly what that looks like yet. We're still figuring this out because we've only done like 2 streams period so far, and this is still being something that we're still learning how to do, but it's really fun. And so if you wanted to check out what we've got going on, we've got a link down here on the live stream, twitch.com/spiritsciencegaming, and we would love it if we could get that up to well over 100 followers, ideally somewhere near in the range of 1 million, because it's Spirit Science, why not? But starting small, and we're building this thing up. So if you're interested in tuning in on Twitch, please come and join us. We're looking at a streaming schedule of Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Or Saturdays is kind of a variable, but we're, and this would be like pretty much these kinds of conversations while games are happening, and then talking about practicing and playing all different kinds of things, because there's been a lot of requests for everything from Among Us to Minecraft and everything in between. So with that, thank you everyone for tuning in. Guys on the stream, do you have any final words, one-off sentences in closure?
Don't rage quit.
I'm gonna copy Chris. You can't get better at the game if you rage quit.
If I had anything to touch with this, with the toxicity thing. Just understand that you guys don't really know who you're playing with all the time. You could be playing with someone that's got a lot going on, and even just a compliment on like, oh, you guys are really good, that could go really far to them. You don't know how long they've been working to get to where they're at. So that'd be where I leave it.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you to Nelson, Chris, and Zach for joining me on this call today. And then thank you everyone who's tuning in to the new format. I hope that you enjoyed the new... Let us know how did you like the new hidden spirituality, and if this is a vibe that you can jump more into, and if you like it, any suggestions, we're always open to improving. And so with that, we'll see you on Twitch or the new Spirit Science YouTube gaming channel. Cheers. Bye everyone.